everybody. I jokingly refer to myself as sometimes as 003, which means I've been active at the national level of the conservative movement longer than every living conservative except two others. 002, Dr. Lee Edwards of the Heritage Foundation, who I will be introducing this afternoon in Las Vegas, Nevada, when he speaks to the Freedom Fest. And 001, of course, is Ann's mother, the First Lady of the Conservative Movement, Phyllis Schlafly. So my cup runneth over today. I'll be with 001, 002, and all of us are going long and hard every day to advance the cause of liberty. And I wrote this book, Ann referenced, Takeover, because in my opinion, conservatives for ever since I've been in politics, which is well over 50 years, as I said, at the national level, conservatives have had their political guns pointed at the wrong target. We've been focused on the Democrats, Harry Reid, Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, whoever it might be at that time active in politics. And that's all wrong, because our number one opponent is the establishment, big government Republicans. And this is a 102-year-old war, literally. In 1912, Teddy Roosevelt, former president, sought the Republican nomination for president, failed to achieve it. Then he left the Republican Party, started the Boo Moose Party, which led to splitting the Republican vote in 1912. Woodrow Wilson's election was less than 42% of the vote, and conservatives have been battling that wing of the party ever since. And sometimes our opponent looks like Teddy Roosevelt, sometimes Alf Landon or Tom Dewey or Eisenhower or Nixon or Ford, or more recently John McCain, Mitt Romney, Bob Dole. These are the big government Republicans, and they're much more in common with Democrats than they do conservative Republicans. Look to the extent that the establishment Republicans went to just a few weeks ago in Mississippi to hold on to power. They will do whatever it takes because they have much more in common with Democrats than they do with us. And they engaged in corruption and lying and cheating to hold on to that Senate seat in Mississippi. And conservatives are like the biblical Jews who could not get to the to the promised land until that generation of failed, flawed leaders had passed from the scene. As conservatives, we're not going to get to the political promised land until we get new leaders. And I think that we are poised to do that, because I've been involved here, as I said, for 50 years. And I'm more optimistic now than any time in my entire life. Over these last 50 years, periodically people will ask me, Richard, is it too late? Have we gone too far down the road to socialism to turn things around? Can we still save America? And I've always had one answer and one answer only, and that is things have to get real bad real quick for America to be saved. Guess what? We're there. That water is boiling, and the American people are jumping out of it. The one thing that I didn't say all these years that I should have, it takes two things. It takes things to get real bad very quickly, and there has to be some political machinery there to take advantage of that opportunity. And that political machinery arrived on the scene in 2009 in the presence of the Tea Party. And the Tea Party has changed everything here in America. When Ann's mother and I were involved in politics back in the 50s and the 60s, the conservative movement rested on a two-legged stool. And a two-legged stool is not very sturdy. And we'd win 40, 45, sometimes 47% of the vote. Very seldom would we ever get 51%. But then under the leadership of Phyllis Schlafly, Paul Weyrich, Jerry Falwell, and others, conservatives began to reach out and bring into the conservative movement the social issues. So back in the 50s and 60s, the two-legged stool, by the way, was national defense, which really meant anti-communism, and economic issues. And that's that two-legged stool that would get us 40, 45% of the vote. Then with the third leg leg being added in the late 70s, and Ronald Reagan reached out and brought all of those people into his movement. And that was the base of Ronald Reagan's election to the presidency in 80 and re-election in 84. Now we have a three-legged stool, and we're winning elections. We're getting 51, 52% of the vote sometimes, but we're not governing America. But then with the arrival of the Tea Party, we now have a fourth leg, and we're no longer sitting on a stool, we're at a big table, and it's changed everything. And I think we have the opportunity now to govern America in a way that I never saw possible before the arrival of the Tea Party. And by the way, conservatives have made a lot of mistakes over the years, but in my opinion, number one is that we became an arm, an appendage, if you would, of the Republican Party. The Tea Party is separate and independent from the Republican Party. They are unfettered. Reagan, when he ran for president in 1976, talked about we need new leadership. He ran against the entire establishment of the Republican Party, the Ford wing of the party, the Rockefeller wing of the party. Remember in 1976, Rockefeller was vice president of the United States. The Nixon wing of the party, the entire establishment opposed him. Only 2 U.S. senators supported Reagan when he ran in 76 and 80, Jesse Helms and Paul Laxalt. He said we need new leadership. Leadership unfettered by old ties and old relationships. The Tea Party is unfettered to old ties and old relationships. I spoke in Dallas a few years ago to about 125, 150 Tea Party leaders from around the country. They had gathered for a weekend of training, and I was their Friday night keynote speaker. And so I met with a dozen or so in my hotel room before the speech and then afterwards. I remember there was a woman from Corpus Christi, Texas, who said that they regularly have meetings of Tea Party. They had a group, I guess there are about 3,000 members of their Tea Party, and the local politicians would call and say, we want to come to your meetings. And her response was, great, we'd love to have you come, but you don't speak, you listen to us. I don't have a conservative friend at the national level that I know of that would talk to a Republican politician like that. And it is so refreshing to hear the Tea Party be so independent, unfettered to the Republican Party. James Carville in 1992 famously said over and over and over to Democrats, it's the economy, stupid. It's the economy, stupid. He wanted to drive that point home to the Democrats for the 1992 campaign. So I paraphrase that and say to conservatives, it's the primaries, stupid. It's the primaries, stupid. Because in 2009, 2010, we could see a wave coming that was going to sweep the Democrats out. And if all that had happened is more big government Republicans had been returned to office, we would have wasted the opportunity of a lifetime. We can see again that wave, and it could be a wave of tsunami proportions that's going to sweep Democrats out of office in November of 2014. And that's why it's so important that we focus on the primaries, not only this year, but also in 2016. And a lot of copy has been written by our enemies, the mainstream media, about how bad the Tea Party is doing in this year's election. Do not believe them. The Tea Party and conservatives, grassroots conservatives, are winning. No Republican out there other than maybe Thad Cochran, and the only reason he did it so he could appeal to liberal Democrats to come in and vote for him. Every other one is running as a limited government constitutional conservative. Not a one of them is running on their record. The Republicans in Congress are acting more conservative than they have in years. And the reason we don't have a lot of liberal legislation right now is because of the influence of the conservatives, Tea Party types, but also almost with few exceptions, very few exceptions, Tea Party victories, conservative victories, have in recent years have come in open seats, in open races. It is exceedingly difficult to beat an incumbent. And where these high-profile races where incumbents are beating the conservatives, the Tea Party candidates, they're outspending them 10 to 1, 20 to 1. And so we're making a difference out there. And so I would urge you to think and realize we are winning, and we, in my opinion, continuing to focus on the primaries, taking over the Republican Party at the grassroots level. Ann's mother, Phyllis, says the most important political position in the world is being a precinct chairman. That means we must take over the Republican Party starting at the precinct level, county, state, and then national. And if we continue to focus on this, I think that we can prevail in primaries in 2016, nominate, elect a principled, limited government constitutional conservative to be the Republican nominee for president in 2016 and be governing America by 2017. To you young people, there's an awful lot of y'all here, and that's great. I'm so exciting to see so many young people here. And it may look like we're in a dark period. Things are not going well. I have been there when there was a darkness about the political landscape of biblical proportions. After the 1964 election, it was tough out there. I mean, it didn't look like there was going to be any hope for us. And the Democrats had 2/3 plus majorities in the House and the Senate. Anything Lyndon Johnson, the Democrats wanted, went through the Congress. I was there after Ford lost in 1976, Carter's 4 years as president. Again, super majorities in the Congress. Okay. And we didn't have at that time talk radio. We didn't know who Rush Limbaugh was, Hannity, Levin, etc. We didn't have the internet. Okay, we didn't have Fox, cable television, and C-SPAN. We didn't have the ability to go around the microphones. I was fortunate many years ago to pioneer political direct mail, which gave us the ability to go around the microphones of the country and communicate directly with the American people. Changed everything in American politics. So now we're competitive in a way that we were not able to be back in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. My book, Takeover, is the only book that deals with what I'm talking about now, the most important political battle in America, as I said earlier, is inside the Republican Party. Most people think it's between Republicans and Democrats. No, it is inside the Republican Party. That's the most important political battle in America. And if we are able to prevail and be able to take over the Republican Party and be the principal opposition to the Democrats, people will reward us with victories. By the way, in my lifetime, long time, Republicans have had 4 and only 4 big victories, all led by conservatives. The face of the opposition to the Democrats was principled limited government constitutional conservatives. Reagan's election to the presidency in 1980, his reelection in 1984, the 1994 Gingrich-led contract with America, taking over the Congress for the first time in 40 years, and of course the 2010 election, Tea Party election. And all of those elections, the face of the opposition to the Democrats was limited government conservatives. Voters don't like the big government types. They don't like, quite frankly, the Karl Rove, the George Bush, the Mitch McConnells, the John Boehner types, Lamar Alexander. And so whenever the face of the opposition, we lose. The Republicans lost the Congress, 2006, 2008. In my opinion, having nothing to do with Nancy Pelosi, Harry Reid, Barack Obama, had everything to do with the failed, corrupt, immoral leadership of the Republicans. 2010 comes along, okay, and Rove, George Bush, McConnell, Boehner, they're nowhere to be seen. What do people see in 2010? They see Marco Rubio, Mike Lee, Rand Paul, Rush, Hannity, Levin, Tea Party. They liked that and gave the Republicans their biggest congressional victory in 75, 80 years. So, Ann, I'm going to wrap it up here right quick, like, so we can go to questions. Let me just make this last point that once, twice, three times a day, Obama's going to do something that's going to upset you, anger you, frustrate you. That's okay. Take 30, maximum 40 seconds. Throw something, get really unhappy. But then get down on your knees and thank God that he's President of the United States, because I know no other way to save America. And it's a high-risk strategy, but there is, we're waking up America, okay? And we are poised to winning here because of the excesses and the extremes of the Democrats and Obama. And so with that, I'll take your questions.
Great. Let's have some questions. Yes, right in here, the lady.
Hi, good morning. My name is Pfeiffer Middleton. I'm from Georgia. Thank you very much for being here today.
Pleasure.
As I'm sure you might know, we have a primary coming up in a couple of weeks between Jack Kingston, who has been in politics for about 2 decades now, and David Perdue, who is a businessman. The common argument in this primary is whether or not we want someone who has been in politics for a long time, who has good relationships up in Washington, or if we want someone who is more in touch with running a business and what it actually means to be an American working hard. Would you just mind sharing your thoughts on the people who would argue that while someone who seems to be a little bit more in touch with running a business and being what you might call an average American, is that better, or should we rely more on someone who does have these relationships, who maybe would give us a better chance of actually passing some conservative legislation past November?
Very, very good question. Thank you for asking it. Yes, in a few weeks there will be a runoff primary for the Senate in Georgia between a longtime political leader and a business person. I'm not in a position to endorse one candidate over the other right now, but I will give you this piece of advice. And I heard it from Herman Cain maybe 10 years ago. Herman talked about the qualities you look for in a candidate. And he said, after you've established their conservative bona fides, the most important quality in a candidate that you want is, for us conservatives, you're looking for a boat rocker. Somebody that's going to rock the boat. And I won't mention names, but there have been a few high-profile Republicans who were not that conservative, but they were fierce partisans, okay? And we've got leaders now that are inarticulate, that are not fighters, and we want a lot of things as conservatives. Maybe number one, we want leaders that will fight, will articulate. And someone who's been in office for 20 years that hasn't been outspoken in providing that leadership, probably not likely to provide articulate leadership for the cause in the 21st year. Let me just take the opportunity to mention something else. Periodically, I'll have discussions with someone about a particular politician, and they say, well, Richard, why don't you think X or Y is a conservative? And I say I've got a foolproof, I call it Viguerie's foolproof test of whether you are a conservative or not. And the test is this: tell me who you walk with, and I'll tell you who you are. I never saw Ronald Reagan in the late 1960s and throughout the 1970s, and I saw him a fair amount. We'd be at receptions. You turn around, oh, hi, Governor, nice to see you. He wasn't at just the head table. He was with us, and he would come to our meetings and sit at the tables with us, okay? And so, but I never saw him, except I saw half a dozen stars of the conservative movement. When you saw Reagan, you say, well, there's Len Nofsinger, and there's Ed Meese, and there's Dick Allen, and there's Judge Clark, and Paul Laxalt, and Marty Anderson. When Reagan moved, conservatives were all around him. So if you haven't surrounded yourself with conservatives for the last 15, 20 years, when you move into office, let's say you're running for president, and I had this conversation with Mitt Romney in 2007 when he was running in 2008. And I asked him about the people around him. And he said, well, you've got to have competent, qualified types, you know. And I felt he blew me off because I said, you know, if all that moves into the White House with you, if you're fortunate enough to win this election, is big government, Wall Street types, captains of industries, CEOs, our issue's over with. Personnel is policy. Conservatives remember that. Personnel is policies. And look who is around these candidates, because if they're not conservatives, you know, they're not going to have conservative policies coming out of their administration.
Okay, next question. Oh, way in the back, Kevin has a question.
I'm Kevin Baird from Pennsylvania. When you started your talk, you were listing a lot of the big government Republicans over the past century. Tom Dewey, Alf Landon, Nixon, Ford, Dole. So that makes it seem like the default position of at least the party leadership is big government Republicans. The two exceptions I can think of that gained the nomination were Goldwater and Reagan. So could you talk a little bit about how they were able to defeat what seems to be the default Republican big government leadership and what that could mean when we're thinking about how we could get a good presidential nominee in 2016?
Well, I don't know if there's any, you know, secret sauce, so to speak, you know, in terms of nominating and electing a Ronald Reagan type. I will say this, that for recent elections, presidential elections, maybe for the last, you know, ever since Reagan, we've had a few, but only a few top-tier, really high-level, limited government, constitutional conservatives running for president. We had some good people, but quite frankly, they weren't people that were going to get the nomination, okay? In 2016, we've got a different problem. In 2016, I think we're going to have a traffic jam of top-tier, high-level, quality candidates running. And my concern is that we split the conservative vote half a dozen different ways. That's a serious danger, because many of the early primary states are in the Northeast. And in the Northeast, it's winner takes all. So that if the establishment candidate gets 30% and the Republicans all get 20%, they get 100% of the delegates. Then you go down to the South and out West, and it's proportional. So that candidate again goes in there, the big government candidate gets 30%, they get 30% of the delegates, unlike the Northeast. So sometime next year, conservatives really need to come together and unite behind one candidate, as we did with Goldwater in '64, as we did with Reagan in '76 and in 1980. And by the way, without promoting any one candidate, and I don't have one that I think is absolutely superior to the others, although I've got one who I'm pretty fond of. But anyway, let me just say that what I do is marketing, and I've been marketing for 50 years, and I know that when I'm trying to develop a marketing campaign for a candidate, a cause, an organization, a product, I want to position my client against the opposition, against the competition, if you would, okay? So that in 2016, if we assume the Democrat is going to be a Washington insider, i.e. Hillary Clinton, okay, I don't think, quite frankly, all due respect to some really good conservatives in Washington here, that I don't think that would be our strongest candidate. I think our strongest candidate will be somebody from the states, a governor, and we've got a half a dozen really good governors. Washington is not popular, you know, what, 10% at best in the polls, so why should we choose our candidate that looks too much in terms of the Washington insider like the Democrats? I think our strongest candidate will be a limited government, good conservative who's done well as a governor.
All right, next question. Yes, Deborah, over there, Avery.
Hi, I'm Christophe from France, and I have a question about the Tea Party. You won't miss to tell me if I'm wrong, but the political system, the American political system, remains divided between Republicans and Democrats. So has the Tea Party a chance to go through to it, or Tea Party leaders should run as Republicans to conform with the traditional system?
Well, If I understand your question right, is should Tea Party type conservatives operate within the Republican Party or start a third party? Some conservatives, myself included, have been there and done that. That ain't good. I think conservatives, as I said earlier, we are so close to taking over the Republican Party and governing America, and it can happen literally in the next few years. So I will be with a lot of libertarians for the next few days and at an annual gathering in Las Vegas. And I tell them, I share your anger, your frustration, your disappointment in the Republican Party, okay? Libertarians, when they operate, in my opinion, in a 501c3, C4 area with ideas, they make a wonderful contribution to the limited government. But when they operate politically, almost always it's a disaster because they go in there and divide the vote, and they've cost many good Republicans their election, defeated a lot of Republicans. With the idea in mind, they're going to try to show the Republicans and teach them a lesson. I don't understand that. We had as fine a constitutional conservative as ever run for office in America, perhaps, Ken Cuccinelli in Virginia last November. Tea Party candidate ran against him, got 7% of the vote. Cuccinelli lost by 2.5%. So I talked to these libertarian leaders, and I tell them I share your frustration, your anger, disappointment with the Republican Party. What is your plan to get 51% of the vote, and govern America? Every one of them have an answer along this line, no exceptions. I'll get back to you on that. None of them have a plan. They know how to destroy. I know how to do that. I know how to tear down, but that's not going to help us govern America. So if all we're going to do is divide the Republican vote, allow the Democrats to sweep the country, and when they have supermajorities at the federal and state level, they will. We see what Obama's doing when he's not and doesn't control the House of Representatives. If they control the Congress with supermajorities and the states, they will rewrite the laws in such a way we'll probably never win another election.